Hey guys, it's Jessica from Peace Love Books, and today I'm here with the second half of my April wrap-up. In the second half of April, I read 17 books, which is a lot, but I was just powering through audiobooks. I was listening to them more than I normally do. Like, I always listen to them when I'm going to work and when I mow the lawn, when I do the laundry, but I was listening to it just like sitting on the couch because the books were so good. So I have a lot to get to. I will go ahead and link my first part of my April wrap-up. I think I read 15 books in the first part of April, maybe 14, I don't remember, but I will link that down below if you are interested in watching it, and I will get to the 17 books I read in the second half of the month. So this month I realized that my Hoopla has a ton of Karina Halley books, so I downloaded a lot, but I only got around to reading My Life in Shambles this month, and I really wanted to read this one because it takes place in Ireland with a rugby player, and this one's so good. I will say, trigger warnings for illness, because one of the characters realizes they have an illness and are dealing with that. This is not mentioned anywhere in the synopsis, so this is a very serious book it turns into. It starts out really flirty and fun. She loses her fiance and her apartment, and she had only been dating the guy for like a year, and people kept on telling her she's moving too fast. They ended up having to break up, and so she decides on a whim to go to, because she loses her job too, so she goes to Ireland with her sisters. I loved her relationship with her sisters, and she decides to put herself out there. It's New Year's Eve, and she approaches a guy in a bar that everyone seems to know, but she doesn't, because he's like a huge rugby player. She doesn't know anything about rugby, and he lets her down easy, but then he decides that he really wants to get to know her, so they spend the night together, and then he asks her to pose as his fake fiance to his dying father. And I will say the illness is not with his father though, it's with a main character in the book, and then they end up having to deal with this illness that occurs as well, and it's so cute. I love a fake dating because they feel like they're starting to like each other but don't know if the other one's acting that way because they're acting or because they genuinely are feeling feelings for them, and I love that angsty dynamic with fake dating. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I want to go to Ireland and find myself a rugby player too, so I would definitely recommend this if you like romance with travel, fake dating. It was amazing. Then I listened to the audiobook of Tide by Carrie Ann Cole. This one is the second book in a series, and I read the first one and it is completely different than the first one. I wasn't a fan of the first one because the age gap was a little too taboo for me, but in this one there's also an age gap that makes me uncomfortable that they never actually address. Our heroine was kidnapped when she was like 5, I think, and she's been kept in captivity for 11 years, and our hero is very scarred because of 2 different incidents he was a part of, and he is like a recluse in the woods, and he stumbles upon her like hidden in a hole and rescues her, and upon rescuing her they think that he's the one that kidnapped her. He doesn't speak because they had a lot of damage to his vocal cords, and so they end up finding her and rescuing her, and then it fast forward 2 years, so she is 18, I think, and he's like in his 30s. And so I don't know if I love that, especially because our heroine, she's been kidnapped since she was like 5, so she's very, very naive about the world, and she acts very young. She's not like a mature 18. She just doesn't know a lot about the world and lets people like dictate what she does and follows along what her parents do, which is, I don't like her parents at all. They pretty much like put her in a home for people who are like recovering from things, and they don't let her stay at their house. Pretty much just like push her away. They're like, okay, you're there, and like don't really care about her. So they have a very weird dynamic with her family, and so she wants to find the guy who saved her, and so she tries to track him down. She finds him, and they spend a lot of time together, and their romance goes from there. Like I said, the fact that she was so young and acted so young, and he was like in his 30s, because he was like 17 or 18 when she was kidnapped. I feel like he was like either 16 or 17 when she was kidnapped. I think he's like 30 and she's 18, which like, I don't know if I love that, but I really enjoyed the romance. It was very sweet. I loved the dog that was in here and her trying to figure out what she wanted to do, who she wanted to be, and how to be someone in society again. So I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think the beginning was better than the end, but I am excited that I read this since I didn't love the first book. It's completely different, and I'd love to see more in the series. Then I read Flock by Kate Stewart. I read this in the TikTok reading vlog I did. Everyone hypes this on TikTok. This was amazing. The beginning is very slow though, so keep that in mind. Our heroine is spending the summer with her father, who she's kind of estranged from, but her mom is going through things, so she decides to spend the summer with her father working for his company before she starts college, and so she meets these 2 guys. So one of them's from work, the other one's his best friend, and the story goes from there. Like I said, the beginning's really slow, and it's just her like having this relationship and discovering learning things about herself and becoming a more confident person, and then things get crazy and things get pretty steamy, and I absolutely love this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I am actually in the middle of book 2 right now and absolutely loving it. Book 2 definitely has a different tone than this. It's not as like summer fun romance as this one was for the first half, because then things get like something's going on here, and then we get the something's going on in book 2. So I really enjoy this, so definitely worth the hype. 5 out of 5 stars. I am so excited to continue with the series. Then I picked up Class Act by Jerry Craft. This one is a graphic novel. It is book 2 in the series. I read book 1 last summer for a book club I did with my high schoolers, and this one I just read because someone gifted it to me for my classroom, because I do have a lot of students who love graphic novels, so I decided to read it, and it's really great. It does focus a lot about Jordan from book 1. Pretty sure Jordan was his name, and then his friend in book 2, and them being friends with his other friend and the dynamics between them because they go to a really wealthy school. There is definitely difficulty understanding each other's lifestyles. I will say that because they go visit one of their friends' mansions and like see that they have like a maid and a driver, and they're like, oh my gosh. And like the one is being raised by his either aunt or grandma. I think it's his grandma, in a small apartment. It really talks about their experience in school together, and I just really love this. I gave it 5 stars. I love Jerry Craft's graphic novels. I'm excited to see what else he can do. I guess there were a lot of cameos of like authors in the graphic novel, which I didn't catch because I don't know what a lot of authors look like, but he in his author's note said like, thanks for letting me use your likeness in here, and I thought that was really fun, so I want to go back and try to see if I can find authors in the book. But I like this. Perfect for middle school or high school classrooms. They are in middle school, but it's great. Then I always say this title wrong. I read A Lady's Formula for Love by Elizabeth Everett. This one I was sent a copy from Berkeley, and I listened to the audiobook through my library, and our heroine is a scientist, and this Scottish bodyguard is hired to protect her because there are people doing bad things with like smoke things, and she can figure out a way to stop it with her group of scientist ladies, and so he's protecting her. And it was really great in the beginning, and then they kind of like jumped into an intimate relationship very quickly, and I was like, that felt like it came out of nowhere. What is happening? And I felt kind of bored by the rest of the book. So like the beginning starts off really great. He's hired. They kind of have an attraction for each other. He has to like tackle her because someone set off an explosion, and then the rest was just fine. I did like the Society of Ladies, but this one could have done so much more with that plot line. And I did like our bodyguard. He had a little bit of a damaged past of his own from what happened in his last job when he was in England for, and I love a good Scottish hero. The audiobook did a great accent for him, but it just didn't live up to my expectations. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't bad, but I really wanted more out of this story. Then I listened to Haunted by Christina C. Jones on audio, and this one is very short. There's 2 books, and I don't know if I want to read book 2. I gave this one 3 stars. It was just okay. So our heroine is in a relationship, and then she sees this like dark, mysterious stranger and starts like fantasizing about him, and then she meets him, and there's this like whole paranormal element to it. And I wanted more of her relationship with that guy. I feel like we didn't get a lot of time with them actually getting to know each other. It was literally all physical, and then we're supposed to believe that they really like each other, but she didn't get to know him at all. And I don't know, it's just like, I felt like it was too short, and then we got this whole backstory of the paranormal aspect. I felt like it was just very disjointed from the contemporary side of it, like today's time with what that paranormal history element was, and I didn't feel that connection with them in the present, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I really wanted more, and like I said, I don't know if I liked it enough to carry on to book 2. I might, I don't know, but it was really short, really quick, pretty unique in its sense because I haven't read a paranormal like that, but I didn't love it. Then I read Meet Cute Club by Jack Harbin. I feel like I'm like the last person to read this. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Jordan loves romance. He loves reading. He goes to the bookstore all the time, and he runs a romance book club, and he ends up buying all the books for the book club because he's just so passionate and excited about it. And he sees Rex, and Rex instantly makes fun of him for what he's reading, and Jordan immediately writes him off. He's like, whatever. So this is really not enemies or hate to love. It's just like, he was annoying to me and I didn't like that, but then Rex starts showing up at his book club and hanging around, and they spend time together, and so the hate really doesn't last that long, and Rex is more willing to get to know about Jordan and what he likes and starts reading romance. I really love this. I mean, as a romance reader, I connected to a lot of what Jordan was talking about with how people make fun of romance and how he's excited to read romance, and the opening scene is him at like the supermarket waiting for his meats to be sliced, and he's reading a romance novel and got so lost in it he didn't realize it was like his turn to go up to the counter, and it was a lot of fun. I really liked it. If you're a bookworm and you love romance, I think you'd really love this. It was an adorable romance as well. I was just rooting for them to be together. I enjoyed this one. Then I read The Heiress Gets a Duke by Harper St. George. I read this for the Ravished by Romance book club. I actually listened to the audiobook through my library, but I was sent this copy from Berkeley. Our heroine is an American heiress, and so she shows up to visit a friend who's not in a really great marriage, and they both go to this underground boxing fighting match, and she sees this guy and she's instantly like, oh, and he's one of the fighters, and then somehow she ends up kissing him, and then she figures out that he's actually a duke and he is destitute. So his family really needs money. His father's passed away. He needs it for his sisters and his estate, and his tenants are relying on him, and so he needs to marry someone wealthy, and so he proposes to her parents to marry, and at first they want him to marry her younger sister, but her younger sister's in love with someone, and so then they start looking towards our heroine, and it's really funny because her parents are just like, yeah, of course, yes, take our daughter, and he's like, these people don't know me, and they're just like handing me their daughter on a silver platter, and I think that commentary on the parents is really funny because that happens all the time in romance novels, but they have an undeniable attraction to one another, but they don't know if they really want to be together. Our heroine has a job with her father's company. She loves working and she thinks that she'll have to give it up in order to marry him. We have a strong working woman, which I love in a historical romance. Let me know if you want that video because someone did ask me for like a working woman historical romance, and I have a lot of those, like even this one. She's a scientist. I didn't really love this one, but I love women who are intelligent and want to do work and not just settle down and get married and have kids. So that's what this book was about. I really liked it. I do think I wanted more of the fighting aspect though. He was fighting for money and we didn't have a lot of it. It was in the beginning and then in the end, and we didn't really have any other fighting involved in here, but I enjoyed the romance, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I wanted a little bit more from it, but overall I really enjoyed it and I'm excited for book 2. Then I picked up Long Way Down. So we are having 2 summer reading camps in the summer this year at my high school, and they have different themes. So one of them is going to focus on character. It's called Character Counts, and then the next month is going to be on poetry, and so we are reading novels in verse and poems for that camp. So I did end up picking up Long Way Down because that's one of our choices for one of the grade levels. We divided it between middle school and high school, and oh, I think we have 3. So we have like middle school, then we have like 8, 9, 10, and then we have 11, 12. So I think Long Way Down, I don't remember what grade level we're doing that for. It might be for 9, 10, 8, 9, 10. But I end up reading it finally, and I didn't know specifically what it was about. I just knew that our main character's brother died. He's on an elevator on his way to get revenge. I didn't know who these people were that were going to be in the elevator, so that was a really pleasant surprise. I don't want to spoil it for anyone. I just loved who these people ended up being that got in the elevator with him, and it was just absolutely heart-wrenching and emotional and beautiful. The way Jason Reynolds used words and language in poetry was stunning. His play on words was absolutely stunning. I just can't describe it any other way than say stunning. I absolutely love this. I would definitely recommend reading it. I've had a lot of kids pick it up because they do like books in verse, but I just had never gotten around to it, and I finally did. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. The ending, it's just like there's no clear-cut right answer to anything that was happening, and so I really loved that kind of exploration of the story, and I liked it, so I would recommend reading it. Then I picked up Shanna by Kathleen E. Woodowis for the Historical Hellions book club I run with Samantha. I will link our live show down below. It was on Samantha's channel. We had Jen and Jessen join, and I will say there are live shows I do for book clubs where I will like a book less the more we talk about it because they bring up good points, or I like it more the more we talk about it. And Jen and Jessen had me really enjoying this book because I know Samantha didn't like it. I think she gave it 2 stars. I initially gave it 3, but I really want to bump it up to 4 because of our discussion of what happened. So Shanna needs a husband because her father gives her a year to marry, or else he's going to get someone for her, and so she decides to go to the jail and say, I need a prisoner so I can be married and widowed right away because I need someone who's going to be like, you know, put to death. And so they show her to this guy, and he's instantly just like captivated by her. The reason I want to give this 4 stars is because of our hero. He is just head over heels in love with her, and he will do anything for her. Shanna was the annoying one. She was so frustrating because she would do things that were super annoying, a lot based on miscommunication, and he would just be like there to save her. And I was like, you know, she's the reason you're in this situation, and yet you're jumping in to save her, even though it's her fault it happened in the first place. She was really frustrating. And then she would like go out of her way to seek him and then be like, stop doing this, I can't be with you. And you're like, you went out of your way to find him. Like, you're so annoying. But our hero was just like absolutely devoted to her. So he obviously didn't end up dying, and then he ends up being like kidnapped by one of her people as like a debtor. I forget what they're called, but they're like people who owe a debt, so they're like sold to other people to like pay out their debt to them then, like their debt's bought it's hard to explain. And so he ends up having to work in debt for her father and really grows on her dad, and he like really like builds a life at his estate, I guess, and that makes her annoyed, and then things happen. So it's very long. I will say there's like 200 pages that like could have been taken out. It does not need to be this long, but it was great reading as a pioneer for the modern historical romance because you can really see a lot of that, and there were really not clear-cut consent issues. There's one scene in the beginning that people have a problem with, but it's really not that problematic compared to other scenes I've read, like the Judith McNaught book we read last month. Like that was a clear-cut, absolutely no way, that's awful. But this one, we agreed that we didn't really see that big of a problem with it in the beginning of this book, and so it was just like really great, and the hero wasn't a really domineering jerk. He was so sweet and supportive of her, which was very surprising as an early historical. So 4 to 5 stars. I initially gave it like 3.5. I wanted to DNF it in the beginning because it was really hard to get through, but by the end you're just like, wow, what a piece of art. So I did read the entire Kimura Chronicles, but I read them between other books. So the first book I picked up was Twisted Loyalties, and I do have a reading vlog of reading the Kimura Chronicles, so I will link that down below. Mafia romance. In the first one we have Fabiano. He ends up seeing this girl who is trying to get a job because she just moved in with her father because her mother is a drug addict. She's in rehab, so she moves in with her dad, who's a drunk and a gambler, and so she needs to get a job. They literally have like no food, so she walks until she finds this bar, starts working there, and Fabiano is a fighter at the bar. I love a good fighting romance in the Mafia. It doesn't work for me in new adult, but I am totally down for a fighting romance in like dark romance. And so he meets her and instantly really likes her and kind of takes her under his wing and like gives her a ride and starts falling for her. He's so respectful of her. She doesn't know who he is, so she's not scared of him. He's used to people being scared of him. He is best friends with the Copa of the Kimura, so it's the boss of the Kimura Mafia, and so he's got a lot of pull and a lot of power, and people are scared of him. She's not, and they spend more time together. They fall for each other. He's like, I shouldn't be liking her, but he does, and there's a lot of fighting in here, and crazy things go down at the end, like crazy, and I didn't know how things were gonna go, but I loved it. Trigger warnings for death of a loved one, torture, all the darkness in Mafia romances. Just know that going into these, but I really love this one. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Maybe Next Time by Christina C. Jones. This one is the first book in the Vegas Night series, and it's like 90 pages, so I read it in a day, and I enjoyed it. It's a marriage in trouble romance, and so the beginning starts out with our couple talking because she has served him divorce papers, and he's angry because they had a fight, and she won't talk to him about it now because he said she was like being ridiculous during their fight, and so she's like, fine, we'll get a divorce. I really do want to tell you there's a trigger warning for miscarriage. I don't believe miscarriages can be used as a spoiler in books, and so that is something that the couple has dealt with, so please be aware of that going in because I know this is a very sensitive topic. But they are forced to confront their issues together. They definitely don't know how to communicate but are really into each other physically, so it's a very steamy book, and he actually kidnaps her basically and takes her on vacation to like force her to talk about their problems, and so that's what this book's about. I know a lot of people don't love the whole fact that he kidnaps her and like forces her to communicate, but he does a lot of growth within the 90 pages, especially when he talks to his friend, and the friend's like, dude, you're dumb, like you're the reason why this whole thing is happening, go after her and fix this problem. And so I really liked that growth in character in only 90 pages, and it was a really great marriage in trouble story for a novella, so I give this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up Twisted Emotions, which is a marriage of convenience between two rival mafia groups. So it is the mafia family from the Bound by Honor series. I never remember what that's called. I have to look that up. But this one, one of the like cousins, I think she's a cousin of the family, is married off to Nino, who is the brother of Ramo, who is the Copa of the Kimura, and so he has to marry her. And trigger warnings for sexual assault. She was sexually assaulted when she was very young, and she is absolutely traumatized because of it. She doesn't want to touch anybody or anything. What I loved about this is the second Nino heard about it, he was like, that is my woman. I'm gonna go after whoever puts their hands on her, and he is taking care of that problem. And I love an overprotective hero, especially in dark romances, so immediately I was like, Nino, you are the man. And I loved it so much. I will say this one kind of takes after that series where there's not as much mafia content as like book 1 did in book 3, so I gave this one 4.5 stars because I do feel like it slowed down a little bit, but she did end up living in their house together with him, and he did cheat with permission. Like, she acknowledges, I'm not gonna give you intimacy right away, you can find it somewhere else, and so he does when they're married, which I didn't like. I wanted him to be the bigger person and not do that, but he does. He had permission, but I had higher expectations for him to not do it, but they end up right after that though, like agreeing, no, we'll try, and I don't want you doing it with anybody else. So it was a really slow, sweet romance, and Nino isn't used to being slow and sweet with women, and he is, and I really love that about this book. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up my nonfiction for the month, and that is Dead Mountain. So this one's by Donnie Eicher, and it was so good. Oh my gosh. I was flying through this book. This is about the, I would never know how to say this, Dyatlov Pass incident, where in Russia in the 1950s there were 9 experienced hikers who were all in college together. So all of them but one were in their early 20s. One of them was in his 30s and he had joined them. And they all died in a freak event and no one knows what happened to them. People still don't know what happened to them. And so there are 3 intertwined storylines in this one. One is the hiker's journey that the author has put together based on their diary journal that they had while they were doing their expedition. So they were going on their expedition to try to get level 3, so they were really documenting everything to try to get this like kind of certification as hikers. So everything was documented well and they had cameras and everything. And so that was one of the storylines. The other one was the search party that had happened after they were like said that they were missing. And then the third one is our author's experience trying to uncover what happened to them. So I really enjoyed the 3 storylines and how we went back and forth between them. So like I always like wanted to get through it fast to figure out what happened, and it was very fascinating. And I loved that we had pictures all throughout as well from their cameras, and like got to see all of them and really get to know them and really feel like they were your friends too, because they were such lively, fun, charismatic people, and people remembered them as they like traveled to getting to the place where they ended up dying, because they had to go through a lot of towns and like see a lot of people. And it's just heartbreaking what happened to them, but I really love his theory. He debunked a lot. So at the end he talked about like the 5 main theories people have and said how all 5 of them, there's no way any of them could have happened. And then he talked about his theory, and I actually agree. And I think it's interesting though that like the New York Times recently posted an article in February about this incident, and I am subscribed to the New York Times as an educator. I get a free subscription through my school, and so I get their daily emails, and one was about that, and they are still adamant that it was an avalanche. And I'm just like, really? Really? And so I don't think it was an avalanche. I agree with what he said. I can see how his answer is what he thinks happened. So if you're at all interested, definitely read this. I love a good narrative nonfiction and a good mystery that's real nonfiction. So I love this. 5 out of 5 stars. It was great. If you know anything like this, let me know. Then I read the long-awaited Twisted Pride. I cannot say the word twisted. Twisted Pride. And this is Ramo's story, and he is the Copa of the Camorra. And I love this so much. It is a captor-captive, so he ends up kidnapping Serafina, and she was the bride of someone in their rival mafia, and it was her wedding day, and he kidnapped her. She's super close with her family. She has a twin brother, and I loved her relationship with her brother and her family. It was amazing. And she's kidnapped by the enemy, and Ramo doesn't want to hurt her. He wants to act like he's hurting her to like mess with her family's minds, and so he doesn't like really hurt her that much. Like, she knows that it's all an act, and he ends up wearing her down and they fall in love, and she is horrified because he doesn't rape her. She willingly is with him, and he has to act like it's rape to her family, and she does have to too, even though it was completely consensual and she really likes him. And then they would cuddle afterwards, and Ramo was like, who am I? Like, I'm a monster. I don't do this. It's so good. And we learn more about Ramo's background and how he's so close with his brothers and why, and it's heartbreaking, and I loved it. Oh my gosh. And this has one of my least favorite tropes, and I was like trash for it. I was like, yes, are they doing it? They're doing it. I normally hate that trope, but I loved it in here because it was forcing things to happen, and it was amazing, and it was so angsty. 5 out of 5 stars. This would have been probably on my top 10 of the year. It might be. I loved it, like, so much. But the last hour and a half of the audiobook was so boring. It was like wrapping up the story, and like I really didn't care because like all of the angst and drama was over and we were just seeing them happy, and I'm just like, I don't care. So I think it would have been great without that last hour and a half. I would have been content because I am a reader who doesn't like to see my characters happy and in love and just like living. I don't care. I like the angst and the drama. So it was great though. I really would recommend reading the series. Then real quick, I'll talk about The Hate You Give by Anna G. Thomas. I reread this for my school's book club. I do run the book club at my high school. We chose this to read. We already talked about the first half. We meet every 2 weeks and read half of the book each time. So we already met for the first half, had a really great discussion, and we're meeting this upcoming week to talk about the rest of the book. I love it. I think we all know what this is about. Star is in the car with her childhood friend, and a police officer pulls him over and ends up shooting her best friend, and then it's all about her having to deal with that and going in front of the jury to talk about it and seeing if they will indict the police officer or not. It is such a powerful book. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars again. I love it, and I can't wait to read the dad's book now. I'm really happy that I reread this one because we do get the dad's book, which I haven't read yet, but I have here from the library, which I'm hoping to read this month because I'm really excited to see him again because I just loved his character so much in this book. So I'm definitely picking up Concrete Rose next. And the last book I read on audio is The Winds of the Storm by Beverly Jenkins. This one is actually a spy romance, so I did pick it up for Spring of Spies. I've been awful and not following along, but this week was this book, so I picked it up. They are reading a spy historical romance each week, and I think there's 2 or 3 weeks left, and I'll link them down below if you want to check it out. But this one is a spy romance, and if you liked An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole, you would love this. I got the same vibes from it because it's during the Civil War. Well, the beginning of this is during the Civil War, and Zara is a spy, and she has been posing as a servant a lot, and she ends up saving a lot of people, and she saves Archer in the beginning of this book, and they're really captivated by one another, but they have to go their separate ways. And then a few years later, she is told by Harriet Tubman that she needs to be a spy in this town to try to figure out, like, these politicians, someone has died, they might have this black book full of names of people they want to kill, and so she poses as a madam of a brothel, and all of her, I'm pretty sure it was like some of the women were also spies in the brothel, and things get really interesting in the beginning with the brothel, and Zara runs into Archer, and she actually wears a mask around so that no one will recognize her, so Archer doesn't know who she is, but they start falling for each other, and she knows she can never be with him. She's a spy. She has to move on to her next mission eventually, and so she doesn't want to get close to him, and she keeps on having to lie to him, and they're still trying to figure out secrets about the people in the town and like who the bad guys are. Trigger warnings for slavery, racism, and there is a white supremacist group in here, so that's all involved, but that's pretty typical for a Beverly Jenkins book. She writes a lot about the history in America with slavery and racism, which I love learning all those different aspects from her books with a really great romance. This one was a lot angstier than normal because they couldn't be together, and so while they were pretty established and happy by about halfway through, like typical with her books, Zara was like adamant that they couldn't be together still, which I really enjoyed. So I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Such a pleasant surprise with that spy aspect. I really want to read more spy romances now because I love it like that. There's points where she dresses up and like sneaks into places, so I would recommend this if you're interested. And those are all the books that I read in the second half of April. Let me know down below if you read any of these and what your thoughts are, or what your favorite book of April was. I would love to hear. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.